They whispered her name long before they ever saw her. Not because of who she was, but because of who her father had been. In the winter shadows of Imperial Russia, the name Rasputin was already a curse. It slithered through palace corridors and village taverns alike, carried on rumors of holy madness, royal secrets, and blood-soaked prophecy. And into that name, into that darkness, a girl was born. Imagine opening your eyes to a world that already fears you. She was not born in a palace, nor into wealth or power. Rasputina, known to history by fragments and contradictions, came into life quietly, in a peasant household, far from the gilded halls where her father would later become infamous. At first, she was simply a child of the Siberian earth. Snow, wood smoke, prayer. A mother's hands. A father who was often absent, drifting between holy pilgrimages and long silences. But even before she could understand words like sin or scandal, her fate had already been written by others. Grigori Rasputin was not yet the monster of legend when she was young. To his children, he was confusing, distant, sometimes tender, sometimes terrifying. A man who prayed loudly, who vanished for months, who returned changed. There were moments of laughter and long stretches of fear. And always, a sense that the world beyond their home was watching, judging, waiting. As Rasputin rose, Rasputina's childhood narrowed. The more powerful her father became, the smaller her world grew. People stared. Neighbors whispered. Teachers hesitated. Friends disappeared. The name Rasputin opened doors in St. Petersburg and slammed them shut in ordinary streets. Imagine being old enough to hear insults, but too young to understand why. At court, her father was spoken of in hushed voices. A healer. A prophet. A devil. Outside, he was accused of corrupting an empire already rotting from within. Russia was cracking under war, hunger, and distrust. And Rasputin's shadow stretched across it all. For his children, that shadow was suffocating. Rasputina learned early that her identity did not belong to her. It belonged to newspapers, to gossip, to enemies she would never meet. She was no longer a girl, she was Rasputin's daughter. Every glance measured her for signs of her father's sins. Every kindness came with suspicion. Every cruelty came justified. Fame, inherited. Not chosen. Then came the year the world collapsed. The Romanov Empire, ancient, fragile, terrified, fell into chaos. Revolution roared through the streets like fire. Crowds demanded blood, and Rasputin's name was already written on their tongues. When her father was murdered, it was not just a death. It was a sentence. His body was gone, but his legend exploded. And his children were left behind to carry it. Public hatred became their inheritance. Private grief, their burden. Rasputina was still young, still forming herself, when the world decided she must pay for a man's life she never controlled. After the murder, doors closed completely. Protection vanished. The family was watched, questioned, threatened. To be associated with Rasputin was dangerous. To carry his blood was worse. Food grew scarce. Safety vanished. Trust became impossible. Imagine trying to mourn your father while the world celebrates his death. Stories spread, some true, many invented. That Rasputin's children were cursed. That they shared his powers. That they should be punished. In a Russia tearing itself apart, there was no space for nuance, no patience for innocence. Rasputina learned silence. She learned to listen before speaking, to study faces, to hide fear. Survival demanded it. Identity became something she wore carefully, or not at all. Sometimes she denied her name. Sometimes she leaned into it. Both choices came with danger. Myth followed her like a second skin. Was she a victim? A symbol? A reminder of a past Russia that many wanted erased? The truth slipped through the cracks of history. As the old world burned, exile became the only option. Leaving Russia was not freedom, it was escape. And yet, even beyond its borders, Rasputin's name traveled faster than she did. She could cross oceans. She could change clothes, languages, even countries. But she could not outrun a legend. Everywhere she went, people wanted something from her. A story. A confession. A piece of the monster. Some pitied her. Others exploited her. Few ever saw the woman beneath the myth. And so Rasputina stood at the edge of a new life, carrying nothing but memories, grief, and a name that refused to die. A name the world would never forgive. As the empire faded into history, she stepped into a future built on uncertainty where her greatest enemy was not revolution, or poverty, or exile, but the shadow of her own father, waiting to claim her next. They said he was a monster. They said he was a saint. They said he was something in between, something unnatural. But inside the walls of his own home, Rasputin was simply father. And for Rasputina, that contradiction would shape her entire life. Imagine growing up knowing the world fears the man who reads you bedtime prayers. As a child, Rasputina saw a version of Grigori Rasputin few others ever did. Not the wild-eyed mystic of newspapers. Not the corrupting force blamed for an empire's decay. But a man of moods and silences. A presence that filled a room, even when he said nothing at all. He could be gentle. He could be frightening. He could disappear for weeks and return as if pulled from another world. No one ever explained where he went. In the early years, before the court and the rumors swallowed him whole, Rasputin was rooted in faith and contradiction. He prayed loudly, passionately. He believed suffering purified the soul. He spoke of God as if they shared secrets. And yet, he was deeply human, flawed, volatile, impossible to predict. For a child, this was confusing terrain. Rasputina learned early to read the room. To sense when her father's presence meant safety and when it meant danger. Love and fear lived side by side. There were moments when he laughed with her, told stories of saints and sinners, spoke of destiny as if it were already written. And there were moments when his intensity filled the air like a storm. Outside their home, the myth was growing faster than the man. By the time Rasputina was old enough to understand whispers, Rasputin's name had begun to rot in the public mouth. In St. Petersburg, he was accused of poisoning the royal family's mind. In villages, he was spoken of as a devil wearing a holy robe. In salons and taverns alike, his name was spat like a warning. And every whisper followed her. Imagine being watched for signs of evil you do not understand. Teachers treated her differently. Other children repeated things they had overheard but could not explain. Parents pulled their sons and daughters away. Some stared with fascination, others with disgust. Rasputina learned that people were no longer seeing her, they were searching for him inside her. Was she marked? Did she carry his corruption? No one asked. They only assumed. At home, silence became protection. Questions were dangerous. Rasputin did not explain himself, and his children learned not to ask. When he left for the capital, the house grew quieter and heavier. Each departure carried the possibility that he would not return. Each return brought new tension. Rasputina watched her mother carry the burden in silence. Watched her brace herself against judgment, hunger, fear. The family lived between worlds, neither powerful nor safe. Favored by the throne, hated by the people. This was the cost of inherited fame. As Russia slid closer to collapse, the pressure intensified. War drained the nation. Hunger spread. Anger searched for faces to blame. And Rasputin's face, bearded, wild, impossible to ignore, was everywhere. At home, Rasputina sensed it before she understood it. The air was different. Strangers lingered too long. Letters arrived filled with threats. The family name became dangerous to speak aloud. And still, he was her father. That truth did not disappear just because the world demanded a villain. There are rumors from those years. That Rasputin trained his daughter in strange beliefs. That she inherited his so-called powers. That she knew secrets of the court. None of it can be proven. Much of it contradicts itself. History leaves only shadows. What is known as this, Rasputina grew up under a weight few could bear. Loving a man the world despised. Mourning him before he was even gone. Learning that truth and reputation are rarely the same thing. When Rasputin was murdered, the myth swallowed the man entirely. But for Rasputina, the loss was raw and human. A father taken violently. A childhood severed. And a future suddenly far more dangerous than the past. The world did not see her grief. It saw his bloodline. In the aftermath, she would be forced to decide who she was without him and whether escape from his shadow was even possible. The question lingered, unanswered, as Russia burned and old loyalties turned deadly. And somewhere between memory and myth, Rasputina stood alone, wondering whether the man she knew had ever truly existed at all. The night her father died, the city did not sleep. Snow fell quietly over St. Petersburg, softening the streets, muffling footsteps, hiding secrets. Lamps glowed behind frozen glass. The river moved slowly, dark and silent. Somewhere beneath that calm, an empire was already collapsing. Rasputina did not see the murder. But she felt it. Imagine the sudden knowledge that the world has changed forever before anyone tells you why. News traveled unevenly in those days, carried by whispers and frightened faces. When the truth reached her, it came without ceremony. Her father was gone. Not ill. Not arrested. Gone in a way that could never be undone. Grigori Rasputin had been killed. In that moment, Rasputina's life split in two before and after. Childhood ended without warning. Grief arrived wrapped in terror. Because she understood something instinctively, this was not only a personal loss. This was a political earthquake. Rasputin's death did not quiet Russia. It inflamed it. His enemies celebrated openly. His supporters fell silent. Newspapers printed his name again and again, drenched in accusation and relief. Stories multiplied overnight, each more violent, more theatrical than the last. And none of them mentioned his children. Inside their home, time seemed frozen. The body had not returned. There was no farewell. No explanation. Only fear. Guards vanished. Protection evaporated. Friends stopped calling. Doors that once opened cautiously now remained shut. Rasputina watched her mother struggle to hold the family together as the world turned hostile. Food became scarce. Money disappeared. Each knock at the door felt like a threat. Outside, crowds shouted for the end of the old order. Inside, a family mourned in silence. Imagine trying to grieve while knowing your surname alone could get you killed. Rasputin's murder was meant to save the empire. Instead, it exposed how fragile it had already become. Within weeks, Russia spiraled. Protests erupted. Soldiers defected. The Romanovs, once untouchable, were suddenly vulnerable. The ground shifted beneath everyone. For Rasputina, fear was constant. People stared openly now. Some with hatred. Some with curiosity. Some with hunger for information, for blame, for a symbol of everything they despised. She was that symbol. Rumors followed her through the streets. That she knew secrets of the palace. That she carried her father's influence. That she should pay for his crimes. None of it mattered. Truth had lost its value. Survival depended on invisibility. The fall of the empire was not a single moment. It was a long unraveling. Authority collapsed. Laws blurred. Violence felt random. And for families tied to the old regime, even indirectly, danger was everywhere. Rasputina learned to listen before speaking. To keep her eyes lowered. To hide her name. But hiding could not erase blood. As revolution hardened into reality, the Rasputin family became a liability to everyone. They were watched. Questioned. Sometimes protected. Often abandoned. No one wanted responsibility for them. No one wanted to be associated with a ghost that still haunted the nation. Poverty crept in quietly. Once, the family had been poor peasants. Now they were something worse, famous and unwanted. Charity came with strings. Assistance came with humiliation. Every kindness felt temporary. Rasputina understood that her father's death had not freed her. It had trapped her. Public hatred grew louder as the old world died. The Romanovs would soon be gone. Faith in God, in monarchy, in tradition, all of it burned. And Rasputin's name was dragged through the fire as proof of everything rotten and false. She carried that name like a wound. Some nights, she dreamed of her father as he had been, quiet, distant, human. Other nights, she saw him as the world described him, larger than life, impossible, monstrous. She no longer knew which memory was true. Perhaps both were. History was being rewritten in real time, and there was no room for complexity. Only heroes and villains. Victors and enemies. Rasputina belonged nowhere. As the empire fell, so did any illusion of safety. The family began to understand that staying meant death or worse. Leaving meant uncertainty. Exile loomed not as escape, but as necessity. Imagine standing at the edge of a country tearing itself apart, knowing that every road forward is dangerous. The night the empire fell was not marked by bells or declarations for her. It was marked by silence, hunger, and the slow realization that her life would never again be her own. And as Russia burned behind her, Rasputina faced a single question, one that would follow her across borders demonstrated by fear and shadows. Could she ever outrun the night that took her father? By the time she crossed Russia's borders, the story had already arrived ahead of her. Not her story. Her father's. Imagine stepping into a new country and realizing your reputation entered the room before you did. Rasputina became a rumor on the move. In train stations and border towns, in cheap rooms and borrowed beds, the name Rasputin still carried weight, heavy, dangerous, unclean. Some spoke it with fascination. Others with fear. Most with contempt. And when they looked at her, they searched for signs. Signs of corruption. Of power. Of madness. They wanted to fear her. Exile did not erase the past. It sharpened it. Without the chaos of revolution to hide behind, her identity stood naked before the world. She was no longer protected by distance or confusion. She was defined by one thing alone. The daughter of Grigori Rasputin. Imagine trying to introduce yourself without using your own name. Everywhere Rasputina went, questions followed. Who are you really? What did your father tell you? What secrets did you inherit? People leaned in close, hungry for scandal, hoping for a confession that would make sense of history. When she said nothing, they invented answers. Some believed she carried her father's influence, passed down like blood. Others whispered that she had been trained in his strange beliefs, that she knew rituals, that she could manipulate. None of it was proven. All of it stuck. Myth was easier than truth. The truth, that she was a young woman displaced by war, grieving, uncertain, was boring. It did not sell newspapers. It did not satisfy anger. It did not explain an empire's collapse. Fear did. Rasputina learned to measure every word. Silence became her shield. But silence, too, invited suspicion. People mistook restraint for secrecy, grief for guilt. She could not win. In poverty, the fear sharpened. When money ran out, when work was scarce, she faced choices no one should make. Some offered help in exchange for stories. Others promised protection for access to her name, her memory, her image. She was not seen as a person. She was a relic. Imagine being forced to trade pieces of your past just to survive the present. Public hatred followed her across borders. Some blamed her directly for her father's influence at court, as if a child could shape imperial policy. Others believed she deserved punishment simply for surviving. Letters arrived filled with venom. Faces hardened when she spoke her name. And yet, there were moments of strange fascination. People stared too long. Asked too many questions. watched her as if waiting for something to happen, as if expecting the legend to emerge from her skin. Was she dangerous? Or was danger simply easier to believe? The psychological weight pressed down relentlessly. Every mirror reflected not just her face, but her father's shadow. She questioned herself constantly. Was she more than his blood? Or was she only a continuation of him, doomed to carry his sins forward? Identity became a battlefield. She changed clothes. Changed accents. Sometimes changed names. Reinvention was not ambition, it was survival. But each attempt at anonymity felt temporary. Someone always recognized her. Or thought they did. Truth blurred with rumor. There are accounts that she leaned into the myth at times, using the fear to protect herself. Others insist she avoided it entirely, desperate to disappear. The records contradict each other. Witnesses remember different women. Perhaps they are all telling the truth. Perhaps she was many women, shaped by necessity. What remains consistent is the pressure. To be feared. To be watched. To be judged without trial. She carried the burden of a man she did not choose, in a world that demanded symbols instead of understanding. Imagine living knowing your existence makes people uncomfortable without ever knowing why. As the years passed, Rasputina stood at a crossroads. Continue running from a name that would never release her, or face it directly, on her own terms. Both paths were dangerous. One promised invisibility, but no freedom. The other promised attention and all the risks that came with it. The world had already decided what she was. Now, she would have to decide who she could afford to be. And somewhere between fear and survival, Rasputina prepared to step into a role she never asked for, one that might finally give her control, or consume her completely. She tried to disappear. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But quietly, piece by piece, like someone erasing footprints in fresh snow. Imagine waking each morning determined to become someone else. Rasputina learned that escape did not mean running. It meant shrinking. Speaking less. Saying no names. Letting the world pass without noticing her. In foreign cities where languages tangled and faces blurred, she attempted something radical. An ordinary life. She changed how she dressed. How she spoke. Sometimes how she signed her name. Each small alteration felt like a betrayal and a relief. The ghost of Rasputin lingered behind her, heavy and accusing, but distance dulled its voice. For a time, it almost worked. But legends have a way of resurfacing. Someone always recognized her. Or claimed to. A journalist. An exile. A stranger who stared too long. The past rose like a tide, slow but inevitable. And with it came the same questions, the same hunger. Tell us what he was really like. She learned that silence did not protect her. It only invited imagination. So she faced a choice she had avoided for years. Continue hiding, forever hunted by rumor, or speak, and try to control the story that refused to die. This was not bravery. It was exhaustion. Imagine carrying a story so long that even denial becomes too heavy. When Rasputina finally allowed her name to surface, it was not an act of pride. It was survival. If the world insisted on seeing her through her father, she would at least decide how much they saw. But control was fragile. Once she stepped into the light, she discovered something unsettling. People did not want the truth. They wanted the myth. They wanted confirmation of their fears, their beliefs, their carefully shaped villains. And when she did not deliver, they reshaped her words. Some painted her as her father's heir, his spirit reborn. Others cast her as a victim, fragile and broken. Few accepted her as complex, ordinary, contradictory. The truth lived somewhere between. Rasputina spoke of a man who was neither devil nor saint. A father capable of tenderness and terror. A human being swallowed by forces far larger than himself. But nuance was unwelcome. The world preferred absolutes. Each interview took something from her. each retelling reopened wounds she had tried to close. Still, there was power in being heard even if misunderstood. For the first time, she was not only running. She was choosing. Reinvention did not erase the past, but it reshaped it. And yet, the ghost remained. Public reaction followed her relentlessly. Some sympathized. Many did not. Critics accused her of exploiting her name. Others accused her of hiding the truth. She could not satisfy anyone. Perhaps she was never meant to. Poverty lingered at the edges of her life. Fame, when it came, was unstable and dangerous. Opportunities vanished as quickly as they appeared. Every connection felt conditional. She was valuable only as long as she remained Rasputin's daughter. Imagine realizing your worth depends on a man you lost long ago. Psychologically, the toll was immense. Identity fractured under constant pressure. Was she honoring her father by speaking? Or betraying him? Was she reclaiming her life or surrendering it completely to the myth? The questions followed her into sleep. There are gaps in the record from this time. Conflicting accounts. Lost letters. Stories that cannot be verified. Historians argue over what she truly believed, what she exaggerated, what she hid. Perhaps she hid even from herself. What is clear is that escape was never complete. No matter how far she traveled, Rasputin's shadow bent toward her. The ghost did not chase, it waited. And slowly, Rasputina began to understand a painful truth. She could run from her father's name. She could reshape it. But she could never erase it. As she stood at the edge of a new life, one shaped by visibility rather than silence, another transformation waited. One that would bring attention, opportunity, and danger in equal measure. The ghost had not let go. It was about to change form. The first time the crowd applauded her, she did not know how to react. The sound was warm, approving, nothing like the silence or suspicion she had grown used to. For a moment, it felt unreal. As if the past had loosened its grip. Then she understood why they were clapping. They were not applauding her. They were applauding the name she carried. Imagine surviving long enough to become the very thing you once tried to escape. Fame came to Rasputina in fragments. Never stable. Never safe. It arrived through interviews, appearances, stories retold again and again, each time slightly altered. She became a living footnote to history, a witness to a man the world refused to stop talking about. For audiences, she was a bridge to something forbidden. For her, it was a transaction. Fame was not admiration. It was survival. Money followed attention, briefly. Enough to eat. Enough to live. Never enough to feel secure. The public wanted access, not truth. They wanted drama, not complexity. Each appearance required her to step carefully between honesty and expectation. Say too little, and she was accused of hiding secrets. Say too much, and she was accused of manipulation. Imagine walking a narrow bridge while the crowd pushes from both sides. The political world that destroyed her childhood still shaped her adulthood. Exile had not erased the revolution's scars. Anti-Russian sentiment lingered. Suspicion followed refugees. And Rasputina's name carried additional weight: dangerous, notorious, unforgettable. Some offered her opportunities wrapped in kindness. Others offered them wrapped in control. Contracts that promised exposure but demanded obedience. Invitations that required her to perform a version of herself she barely recognized. She learned to smile when expected. And to harden when necessary. Reinvention became an art. She adjusted her story, her tone, her posture. Not to deceive, but to survive. Each version of herself was a shield, shaped for a different audience. Was this exploitation? Or agency? The line blurred over time. Privately, grief remained untouched. The loss of her father never softened, only deepened. Fame did not heal it. Attention did not replace what had been taken. Public curiosity felt invasive, as if strangers believed her pain belonged to them. Imagine being asked to relive your worst memories on command. At night, when the crowds were gone, she was alone with questions no one else cared to ask. Had she preserved her father's humanity, or buried it under performance? Had she reclaimed her life, or sold it piece by piece? Even she did not always know. There were rumors during these years that she exaggerated stories, that she concealed darker truths, that she enjoyed the spotlight more than she admitted. Each claim contradicted the next. None could be proven. History offers no clean answers. What remains clear is that Rasputina endured. In a world that had tried to erase her, she stayed visible. In a story that had written her as a footnote, she insisted on a voice even if that voice was filtered through expectation. The psychological cost was high. Identity became fluid, unstable. She was never fully private, never fully public. Never entirely herself. The name Rasputin hovered over every introduction, every headline. It was both curse and currency. Imagine carrying a legacy that feeds you and poisons you at the same time. As the years passed, interest slowly faded. New scandals replaced old ones. The world moved on, as it always does. But Rasputina remained, suspended between relevance and obscurity. And in that quiet, another question emerged. When the applause stops, what remains? Without the crowd. Without the myth. Without the shadow. Rasputina stood once more at the edge of uncertainty, older now, wearier, still unresolved. The name that had defined her life was beginning to lose its power over the world. But not over her. And as the noise faded, one final mystery lingered, something she had never fully shared, something history never settled. A secret that would follow her to the end. In her final years, Rasputina stopped correcting people. When they got the story wrong, she let it stand. When they repeated rumors, she did not interrupt. Silence, once again, became her refuge. Imagine carrying the truth for so long that explaining it feels heavier than hiding it. By then, the world remembered her only faintly. To some, she was a curiosity from another age. To others, a lingering echo of Imperial Russia's darkest hour. The headlines had faded, but the legend had not disappeared. It had simply settled into something quieter, more distorted. And somewhere inside that distortion lived her last secret. Rasputina had spent her life moving between identities. Daughter. Exile. Witness. Performer. Survivor. Each role demanded something different from her. Each took something away. By the end, it was no longer clear where the roles ended and the woman began. People still asked her questions. What was Rasputin really like? Did he know his fate? Did he deserve what happened to him? She answered carefully, if at all. Sometimes with softness. Sometimes with distance. Sometimes not at all. Those closest to her noticed the pattern. She avoided one question more than any other. What did she believe? The truth is, Rasputina lived inside contradiction. She had loved her father. She had feared him. She had suffered because of him. And she had survived because of his name. None of those things canceled the others. Imagine trying to hold all of that at once. History wanted her to confirm something, either the monster or the saint. She refused to do either. And in that refusal, she created her own quiet resistance. Not against politics or power, but against simplification. There are fragments from her later life. Letters that hint but do not explain. Conversations recalled imperfectly. Moments when she almost said something and then changed the subject. Scholars argue over these silences. Were they guilt? Protection? Or simply exhaustion? The world that shaped her was gone. The empire collapsed. The revolution hardened into memory. Even the outrage surrounding Rasputin softened with time. But the psychological weight never left her. Being judged for her father's sins had shaped every decision she made. Where to live, whom to trust, what to reveal. Poverty still hovered at the edges, even in old age. Fame had never promised security. Only exposure. And exposure always came with risk. She remained cautious to the end. Imagine reaching the final chapter of your life and realizing the story was never really yours to tell. Some claim Rasputina knew more than she ever admitted. That she carried secrets about the royal family, about her father's influence, about events that history never fully explained. Others believe there was nothing to tell, that the mystery existed only because people needed it to. The records do not agree. What we know is this: when death came, it did not come with revelation. No final confession. No dramatic unveiling. No clear answers. Just silence. And perhaps that was the point. Rasputina had spent her entire life being watched, interpreted, misrepresented. In the end, she kept something for herself. Whether it was knowledge, belief, or simply peace, we cannot know. The last secret of Rasputina may not be a fact at all. It may be the refusal to be defined. Imagine a woman who spent her life trapped inside a legend and chose, at the very end, to step outside it. History will continue to argue about her father. About his crimes. His influence. His place in the fall of an empire. But Rasputina remains harder to grasp. Less dramatic. More human. A woman born into a name the world would curse. A woman who survived it. And a woman who carried one final truth into silence, leaving us to wonder whether the greatest mystery of all was never Rasputin himself, but what his daughter chose not to say.